good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee. I'm a research analyst with Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on gold and copper exploration and development today. We will hear from Marshall Koval, CEO, and Scott Hicks, VP Corporate Development and Communications of Luminex Resources Corporation. During today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss some fine print. During this Luminex webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined on page 2 of the Luminex corporate presentation that can be found on the company's website, luminexresources.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Luminex. So we have Luminex presenting today. The company is focused on exploration and development of a portfolio of projects in Ecuador, headed by its flagship Condor project, which has multiple areas of interest. With that, I now turn it over to Marshall and Scott to update our audience on the company.
Great, Tim. Thanks a lot for the time today for your viewers. And we have a nice news release out today that sort of updates you on some of the drilling that we've been doing at the Condor North area, epithermal underground target at Cuyes West and at the camp zone. And basically, we're in the process right now of sort of rescoping the project. I'll make some forward-looking statements today. And, our flagship project is the Condor Gold and Copper project, where we have 2.3 million ounces of gold in indicated and 4.3 in inferred, along with some copper. Condor North, we did a PEA in 2021, and we had a 387 million NPV production profile of about 187,000 ounces of gold per year and a 12-year mine life. And that included both a underground target at the camp zone that was 25,000 tons per day, and the balance was from an open pit target, another overall 25,000 ton per day, including the camp zone throughput. And basically what we've done subsequently is we've discovered this new Cuyes West high-grade zone. I'll talk a little bit more detail about that, but we're getting really good results, and basically at the point where this may change the PEA significantly that we put out in 2021 and focus the company more at this Cuyes North area on an underground operation, potentially with both underground camp zone and Cuyes. So we're working on that. In parallel, we're drilling at the Prometedor project, or Prometedor deposit, which is about 3.5 kilometers from the camp zone. We'll look at that a little bit more. And then we have copper earn in partnerships with Anglo American at the Pegasus project, where they have to spend $57 million to earn 60%. They're planning a 3,200 meter drill program to test some porphyry copper at the Medusa target. And then in parallel, we're operating the Orchideus project for Jogmec, where they have to spend $7 million to earn 70%. And to date, these JVs we've have brought in about 42 million of undiluted capital into early stage copper exploration projects. So anyway, that's kind of the overview of the company, the two primary directions that we're going with Condor and then with our partnerships. If you look at the company, we have research coverage from Haywood and Red Cloud. Haywood put out a note today following up on this Cuyes West and the camp zone drilling that we put out. Key shareholders are in the Lumina Group with Ross Beatty, about 25%, an Ecuadorian entrepreneurial group, 14%, Route 1, private equity, or a fund out of San Francisco at 11%, and then some other funds for another 10%. Issued and outstanding shares, 132 million. Warrants, 11 million outstanding, fully diluted, about 151 million shares. Market cap Canadian 40 million. We believe we're way undervalued, particularly given sort of the results that we've been putting out recently. At September 30th, we had 3.9 million in cash, and the 52-week trading range is 18 to 49 cents. So, Ecuador has come a long way since we entered the country in 2014. We have two major mines that have been built and in production, both around $1 billion of initial capital and sustaining capital to put them into production. That's Lundin Gold's Fruta and the Mirador mine. It's a large copper porphyry by Tongling and China Rail. And then we've got the Curipamba project of Aventus that is getting its permits and financing in place and should start construction soon. And then you've got La Plata and Loma Larga, which are kind of ready to construct, sort of next projects after Curipamba that are being permitted. And then we come down to Cascabel, Cangrejos, and Cangrejos is in Lumina Gold, the sister company, and then the Condor project that we'll be talking about today. So really, since 2014, the fiscal and regulatory regime and the general support for mining with the administrations in the country under current President Lasso have improved the mining sector and created quite a bit more investment. You can see that in the upper right-hand slide here. And then also from investment attractiveness, the Fraser Institute has shown that Ecuador continues to improve from an investment perspective. So basically, the last three elected governments that we had have been supportive of mining. And we think mining is on a good path in Ecuador as an emerging mining jurisdiction. Just kind of show you where we're at in Ecuador. The Condor project, which we're going to talk about primarily today, is in the southeast part of the country along the Peruvian border. That's where most of the activity in the country is. If you go up to the north there's the Warintza project that Solaris has. Mirador mine that I mentioned earlier is in production. It's about 60,000 ton per day producer. And then you've got Fruta del Norte, that's a 4.4 thousand ton per day producer that produce over 400,000 ounces of gold in their current guidance. And then you go further south to these projects in blue, Cascas, La Canela, Tres Picachos. Those are copper projects that we have. Then we also have the Tarqui project in Kimi. And then the way up north there is the Pegasus project that we have the JV with Anglo American. Here's a little bit closer view on that corridor I was talking about just a little while ago with basically Warintza and Mirador and then Fruta. And then you can see in yellow here where the Condor project is. And you can see also Orquídeas where we have the JV with Jogmec. Basically the most active region in the country, the highest amount of investment, and an area that that has been fairly positive with mining development in the region. What we can look at here is just, again, this is looking at the geology here, but basically what we were able to do in the last year is we had 90% ownership in Condor. Now we're up to 98.7. 1.3% is owned by the Ecuadorian Armed Forces Pension Fund. Prior to our involvement in 2016, there was about 40 million spent on the project, and we continue to define more resources and develop. And I'll refer you back to the press release that we put out today. Just looking at the overall resources here, if you go down to the camp zone, I'm going to focus a little bit on the underground here. You can see these 4 red stars up in the upper right-hand corner. Those were the deposits that went into the PEA. The camp zone had 6 million tons of 3.45 grams per ton gold, near surface, really easy access right under our camp. And the rest of the targets, Cuyes Soledad and Enma, which were in the PEA, were open pit targets. But subsequently, we've discovered this Cuyes West area that looks a lot like the camp zone. These are rhyolite dikes and breccias that are highly mineralized in gold. And we've been drilling at Cuyes here and basically, as I mentioned earlier, what we're looking at now is the potential to bring the Cuyes West and the camp zone in as underground targets in a potential updated PEA. Obviously, we have to do more drilling next year to get Cuyes into an inferred resource, but the initial results are looking really good. This is just a look at the camp zone. So you can see in the middle up there, the Los Cuyes pit, and adjacent to that on the northwest side is where the Cuyes West structure comes through. Then you have the camp zone, which is the other underground structure. And then we have another target along strike, similar geology, is the Prometedor target, which we're working on getting access into the area right now to drill. That's an open pit target, but it also has some of the rhyolite dikes and breccias that were present at the camp zone in Los Cuyes. But right now we're looking at an open pit target there. If you go back and look at some of the results that we published, so to date we drilled 15 holes in Los Cuyes here. We put out the first 9 holes. If you look at this, you see very consistent, and these are pretty close to true width numbers, 4 meters to sort of 9 meters of 5 to 12 gram per ton material in the area. And then we also have this Cuyes 12, which we haven't put out, where we have a really nice intercept of 7 meters. Looks very similar to CU 2205, which is the highest grade hole that we drilled to date. That was 5 meters at 30 grams. So this number 12 is down dip from there, probably about 50 meters below it. And, we think we're into a really good area here that will continue to step out and drill. And to give you an idea, I mentioned this earlier, the camp zone was about 450 meters on strike. We've got some 300 meters on strike defined at Cuyes West, and it's still open. We put together a drill program for next year, so we'll look to drill between the camp zone and Cuyes West roughly about 10,000 meters of additional drilling, and that should get us to the point where we can have a resource at Cuyes West. This is just a grade thickness map, and you can see circled in red here the hole number with the 30 gram intercept, and then you can see hole number 12 below it where we have drilled it, but assays are pending. The structure looks the same, mineralization looks the same, so we're hoping for some good additional drilling, high-grade zones there. This is over at the camp zone. We put out recent results there as well. We had 14 grams result in hole number 39 there, 8.9 grams and 40 and 3.4. To give you an idea, the average grade of the camp zone was 3.45 grams per ton plus about an ounce of silver. And this area that looks a little bit like an octopus with all the arrows there, that is an area that we expanded these drill holes in. And what we did is we went back to our mining engineering consultant who identified some open areas that looked like they were highly prospective. So we drilled those. So we've been able to expand the camp zone. We've got some shallower targets that we drilled recently that results are pending. So we're continuing to look at the potential to expand the camp zone as well. This is over to Prometedor. So we've got a kilometer of surface anomalies here, both rock and soil anomaly. And if you look at the northern half of this, sort of the 500 meters to the north on this figure, that's where we're targeting right now. We're in the process of building drill pads and getting access. It's a real steep area. It's been a little bit tougher to get into than we had hoped for, but we should be drilling this soon, most likely early next year. If you go and look at sort of the economics on this, the costs are really good. The AISC's good on the project. If you look at $1,600 gold, you're basically got a 16% IRR on a 387 NPV. One of the issues that we're working with in trying to define this tighter scope, higher grade project is to bring down the initial capital, which was $607 million in the PEA that we put out. really good production profile in the years 1 through 5, sort of 220,000 ounces a year. Of that, about 80,000 come out of the camp zone. So what we're looking at now is if we can bring the Cuyes West into a similar resource size as the camp zone, that maybe you get sort of 120 to 150,000 ounces a year production, a lot lower initial capital, maybe in the $200-300 million range. And you're looking at these underground development targets, and they're both very close to the surface. The camp zone had minimal development to get into it, and Cuyes looks very similar. So let's just switch over and talk about the JVs that we have with Anglo. Basically, Anglo spent about 15 million, 16 million to date. They're getting ready to drill at the end of this year. They're in the field now. Possibly they'll start early next year in this Pegasus A area. Basically, they have to complete 57 million in spending between 2018 and 2024 to earn 60%. And then they can go to 70% by taking us to a construction decision. So right now they're at about 25% of the earn-in. They've got some really good targets they're looking at. They've identified 8 porphyry copper targets within the Pegasus A area. The Medusa, where we show A through A prime here, cross section, is the first area that they're going to go ahead and drill. There's been a little bit of drilling data in the past, pretty minimal, but they've defined quite a large area, a larger porphyry center than we had identified in our previous work. And that's where they'll be drilling the 32,000 meters or 3,200 meters in 5 holes. So we're looking forward to those results. Here's just a cross section of the magnetics and the resistivity Z10 geophysics over the area. It kind of shows a classic porphyry signature from a geophysical perspective. And this is the target that Anglo will be drilling. Over at Orchidius, Jogmec has picked up the project after First Quantum drilled 5 holes. The work that was done by First Quantum showed copper mineralization over long intervals, but fairly low grade. What Jogmec is doing at Orchidius here is they're coming in to drill some of the more better geophysics combined with geochemistry targets. So we will continue drilling next year, probably a program of about 1,500 meters initially. We're the operator on the project. So basically stay tuned and we'll see what happens at Orchidius. And then I think when you look at, reasons to really look serious at the company, and particularly now in this real low share price environment where you've got a lot of the junior exploration companies kind of in the gold space out of favor at the moment. Now with gold price moving up, I think it's a good time to look seriously at the company. We're continuing to develop really good results at the Condor North area, as I've talked about through this presentation. We're going to see quite a bit more drill results over the next few months. Right now, we're going back and planning for the 2023 drilling. We've got 1 drill rig on site right now drilling, and we're moving the second one up to the Prometedor target. Next year, we plan to have a couple drills going. So I think we're going to continue to focus on the high-grade areas at Cuyes West and the camp zone, and then hopefully we'll have some good results out of Prometedor. The early stage earn-ins with the copper partners, both Jogmec and Anglo, we've talked about, those should provide ongoing drill results next year. And, if you look at the management team, we've been together since, a lot of us, since 2004 with Ross Beatty through the various Lumina companies. And we've got a history of exploring, discovering, de-risking, and monetizing assets. We're a highly aligned management team with 25% ownership. So together with our investors, we'll continue to move these forward. And I'd encourage you both to take a look at the press release today that I've talked about a few times, and then look at the company overall. I think we've got a bright future here. And with this, Tim, I think I'll turn it over and open it up to questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Marshall, for a very informative presentation. We'll now move to the Q&A portion of the webinar. A reminder to everyone on the line, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We already have several questions here. Maybe we'll start off with questions about kind of operationally. Have exploration costs per meter increased much due to inflation?
No, we've got long-term relations with our drilling contractors. Primarily, Rumi is doing most of the drilling for us. And Ecuador, it's kind of interesting. Well, the rest of the world has had, 9-10% kind of inflation at the peaks. Ecuador peaked at about 3.8. So it's a US dollar denominated currency. You've got diesel prices in the country that are, it's a petroleum producing country, so not heavily taxed, and some of it's subsidized. But industry wise, we haven't seen big increases in costs, and labor costs have been relatively stable. So we haven't had major inflation with drilling. Most of the drilling is around $250 US a meter in country.
Great. Have you had any delays at all due to supply chain issues?
No, we've been pretty lucky. There was some demonstrations back in June that cut off regions in the country, and we're kind of in a remote area in the southwest corner, but we were able to continue to operate through the demonstrations that lasted about 20 days. And so we really haven't had any issues like that. We've been able to keep diesel and our camps going. And, we have power to both Lumina Gold camps and the Luminex camps that we have. So grid power. So we've been able to continue on. We got close to running out of food at the worst point, but we were able to get food in, and, we've been able to manage.
Great. And one thing that had been industry-wide, but assay lab waiting times, are they back to normal, or are they still pretty long?
I think they've got a new normal now where they're at least a month out for the most part, even when you rush things. So, it got to where we were sort of 2 months out on some of the assays, which was pretty bad. Part of that was transportation. We have our stuff done in Peru, so we're pretty close to be able to get it there logistically, but we're sort of 2 weeks to 4 weeks on average with assay results right now.
And question here on specifically honing in on some of the targets. There seems to be no gold at El Hito, obviously a copper-oriented target. What does that mean geologically?
Yeah, so I didn't really talk too much about El Hito in the presentation, but it's an area that's south of Prometedor and between there and the Santa Barbara deposit, which is another gold copper porphyry with about 3 million ounces of gold in it. Basically, you get with porphyry copper systems, a lot of they're pretty complex as far as whether you have gold or not. There's always a trace amount of gold in most of these porphyry systems, but a lot of it has to do with mineralogy, porphyry pulses. Do you have multiple porphyry pulses? Do you have epithermal mineralization overprinted it? So basically what we're seeing in the porphyry deposits that we have where we get gold, you tend to have bornite in, and that's where you tend to see the gold. Whereas if it's not bornite mineralogy and you have chalcopyrite, you see less gold. So if you look at the El Hito target, it's more of a copper moly target, and it has more of the chalcopyrite, and it doesn't have much of the bornite present. So that's part of the explanation. It's more complex than that, but it's not unusual to have porphyry clusters together, and some will have more gold rich and some less. Tim, you're a geologist, I believe. I don't know your view on that. I think I got it right.
Sounds about right.
And Marshall, maybe talk about, as you go north towards Prometedor, what we were kind of seeing in that last copper press release we put out there, as far as kind of the Prometedor copper transitioning to the Prometedor gold target that you talked about as you kind of go north.
Yeah, I mean, in a classic porphyry system, a lot of times you'll have epithermal, then intermediate, and then the porphyry mineralization itself, which is more copper dominated, and the epithermal stuff is more generally more gold dominated. So as you move north, we have more of the system preserved. So what you're seeing is on the southern end of Prometedor, we have a porphyry copper target that we've just started to do work on. And as you go north, you get in higher up in the system where you're in the intermediate mineralization and then up into the epithermal. So that's kind of what we're seeing. And we're going to test that with the drilling at the Prometedor gold target, higher up in the intermediate to the epithermal part of the system.
Great. And we have a question here on kind of looking at well, I guess the question is, does the 2,700 meter access trail go from Enma to Prometedor Gold? If so, have you done systematic rock and soil sampling between those two prospects?
Yeah, every time we open up a trail or a road out there, we sample it. And that was basically how the camp zone was discovered. It's kind of ironic because there were roads up in the area and quite a few geologists trudged over the area over time. And then we widened the road and we exposed some more outcrop. We did some sampling there and the structure came to surface. And that was how we focused on finding the camp zone. And then subsequent drilling, we produced, that 3.45 gram per ton gold. I think it was 6 or 8 million tons. And so every time we go in and open up new areas, we're in there sampling them. So we have seen on the trail going up to Prometedor, we've seen breccia zones and mineralization. We've seen the rhyolite dike cut in different places. So yeah, that's part of our normal protocol.
Okay, great. And there's one question here, kind of circling back on the copper, but looking at the press release in mid-November, there was a map with regional copper geochemistry. And the question is, what are some of the reasons why soil testing near the Warintza target seems to be more muted?
Soil testing for the Warintza target seems more muted. I don't know the definition of muted in the context of a porphyry copper deposit, but we have seen mineralization there. A lot of the times the soil work, with the topography that you're dealing with in the area and access, I mean, it's an area that's got quite a bit of forestation in there. So you don't always get a good broad soil profile developed on some of the steep hillsides. So I don't know exactly what the point of the question is, other than to say that there's still a target there.
Okay. And a question here on kind of a different topic, but describe relations with nearby indigenous groups.
Yeah, I mean, we're in an area where the Shuar is the primary indigenous population in the area. And we've been there's been work going on back into the 90s at the Condor project. In the Shuar are our local communities. We employ quite a few people. We have good working relationship with the community. So, all in all, we're able to operate with them. So it's not been an issue. The same is, if you look at Lundin, at Fruta del Norte, they're dealing with other Shuar communities of indigenous people, and you're able to work with them. I think they're pretty open-minded. If you got to keep your word, though. You have to, clearly state what you're going to do and how you're going to work with them. And if you don't do that, you're in trouble. So that's kind of a key part to success to continue to operate.
Great. And looking at kind of the, availability of people, do you need to expand your local workforce, and are the right skill sets available locally?
So we have a pretty good team. If you look at break it down into a couple different parts here. If you look at the technical team that we have a good, strong technical team. We have probably somewhere in the order of geologists and field technicians that help the geologists in mapping and sampling. We probably have about 20 people, working primarily up in the Condor area and some of our other concessions to maintain them. So on the technical side, and also as far as community relations people, we have a good solid staff there that have been with us a long time. So we're solid there. As far as physical labor, and we use man-portable drill rigs, and we try to do as much work with the community as possible. Just a general working, workers on the project to transport drill rigs, do different things logistically, clear roads, trails, construction of drill pads, all that sort of thing. There's ample people available from the local communities, and we try to prioritize that. At the end of the day, the communities want help with education, health, et cetera. But at the end of the day, they really want work. So, that's a key focus for us.
Great. And I guess circling back here a little bit on the geology, there's a question that says, obviously you've had some success identifying more of the epithermal deposits, but there was a mention of looking for a deeper porphyry at Los Cuyes. Is there any potential there for porphyry underneath kind of the epithermal deposits, or what are there other indications that you've seen on that side of things?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've seen in the rhyolite dikes and the breccias and some of the veins a few clasts of mineralized porphyry, like chalcopyrite in porphyry, up in the breccias, and so there's a porphyry at depth. You just don't know how deep it is, right? And I'm talking below the 4 red stars that were in the presentation at Cuyes, the diatreme there at Cuyes West, Camp Zone, and Soledad and Enma. So somewhere below that at depth, is a porphyry system. And we're in the upper parts of, the intermediate sulfidation and epithermal mineralization up there. So there's a porphyry at depth. How deep, I don't know. But obviously there's gold mineralization in it along with copper.
Okay, great. And one other question here about an exploration target. It was referring to a specific figure in the PEA, but there seems to be an exploration target south of camp called Canguime that runs parallel to Soledad Baja and Soledad. Can you tell us more about that target? Is there any exploration work planned for that area?
Yeah, what's kind of interesting, and it's starting to evolve right now, is basically if you look at the Condor North area, the mineralization, the diatremes and the rhyolite breccias and the veins that we found to date, they sit in a kind of a caldera, collapsed caldera. And you get these ring dikes and you get this mineralization. And we're starting to do a lot more structural work. So they're to the south of the camp zone, and it's down towards Vichy Canguime is the concession. Down in that general area, there's the potential for more of these ring-like structures. Where you get veining and breccias and rhyolite. So there is potential down there. It's not been the focus of the current work right now, because we're trying to define, more of the Cuyes West mineralization and enhance the camp zone mineralization to kind of develop more of a development project. But there's so much. This is a really heavily mineralized area, and there's so much more exploration work to do. And as we start to understand it structurally better, we hope to be able to identify other targets similar to the camp zone in Cuyes West, where we can see some of this near surface, higher grade gold mineralization.
Great. And one other question here about, obviously the press release today, you did have a fan of 3 shallow holes in the Ruiz structure. What do those holes tell you? What are the results there?
So basically, the Ruiz structure and the Cuyes West, it's really hard. We're trying to figure out what the relation of those 2 structures are. We had one really good drill hole that went through there that we thought was the Ruiz structure, initially, and I believe it was Scott, it was in our last press release, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we drilled 3 subsequent holes that showed a narrower structure and less mineralization. Now we're trying to figure out if what we believe that high-grade mineralization in the Ruiz structure is actually part of the Cuyes West. So what we're going to continue to do some work in that Ruiz area, but right now we've got a pretty solid focus on Cuyes West. That's where we're going to do the work. And as we do more drilling, we'll have a better idea on what that Ruiz target means.
So if you look at the plan map from today's press release, where the two red lines intersect there, that the 30 gram per ton hit was basically right at that intersection, and that's where hole 12 is just going to go underneath there. So we'll focus more and closer to that intersection than versus those 3 holes that were higher up.
Okay, great. And then a couple of questions that are more general on a corporate level, but looking back and knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently in the last year or 2?
No, I think, let's say the last year, I think after we put out the PEA, we really looked hard at how we could enhance the PEA going forward and, what did that mean? And we were starting to develop some geology and mapping and sort of looked at this Cuyes West zone came out of it. So I think from that perspective, by stepping back and refocusing and trying to enhance the PEA, we made this discovery. So I wouldn't change anything there. We did some drilling at El Hito because we thought that there's good copper potential, and we still believe there is. The work that we did there showed long intercepts of copper mineralization, but it was lower grade than we had hoped for. That doesn't mean that there isn't a good solid deposit there. We believe we were up in the phyllic alteration instead of the potassic alteration zone, so there's more work to be done there. But I think if I were to do something different in hindsight, I would have taken that effort at El Hito and focused it more at the Condor North area where we're seeing success now. But to look back, you can't change anything, right? Scott, you got a view on any of that?
No, I mean, if we saw more of the same as the southern El Hito drilling that had previously occurred, where we did drill in the north, that would have been meaningful, and that's definitely why we allocated part of the budget to that. I think we've been able to drill a lot more meters than we thought we might in this year. When we did the raise in May, so we've definitely been happy with that. I see there's one question kind of about, how much goes to drilling, and we've probably completed pretty close to 10,000 meters this year, and so that would be about roughly call it 4 million Canadian. So hopefully that answers that question. But no, we've been happy with the amount of meters and the success we've seen.
Great. And following up on that, looking forward, what will have to happen in 2023 for you to say that your objectives were successful?
To have more positive results from this drill program Scott was just talking about, what we're going to do now is try to identify the strike length of the Cuyes West structure and also start to drill it down depth, which we've started to do. It's still open. But if we can get to, sort of 450, 500 meters of strike length, and then 500 or 600 meters down dip of extension, then that'll be pretty successful for us at Cuyes West, right? And that's sort of how we've targeted the drilling program. And that should take us to an inferred resource that we could basically look at either publishing that straight away and or updating a PEA depending on the results.
Okay, great. And kind of
like all these questions. These are a bunch of good questions.
Yeah, we've had a lot of good questions today. One other question, kind of looking forward. If all goes well, which year would you expect to have an operating mine and first gold pour?
Yeah, basically, I think you're probably a couple of years more of exploration here, 2023, 2024, then you're somewhere at the end of that or towards the tail end, you would start looking at a PEA then you do a pre-fees, and so you're 5, 6, 7 years out probably before you do a gold pour.
Great. And one interesting. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to say it's a shorter. What we're contemplating, obviously, is a smaller plant, and it's like if you look at Congreos or in Lumina, it's a 3-year build. This would be a smaller plant, so more along the lines of kind of a 1.5-year, 2-year build conceptually. Yeah. Similar permitting timeline periods from kind of when you have a PFS of, call it, 1.5 years, 2 years to get that across the line. So, you're kind of 4 years from whenever you get to a PFS, and that requires a bit tighter drilling than what Marshall was saying for inferred. So hopefully that's kind of a better whole picture for someone there.
Yeah, for instance, you'd have to go back into the camp zone for a PFS, and right now we drilled that at 75-meter spacing, and probably to get to indicated resource, it's maybe 25 meter spacing that you'd have to do in there. So, you'd have to go do that additional drilling as well, which is probably 10,000-15,000 meters. So you'd have to do a similar thing at Cuyes. So there's field work to be done yet before you can start looking at the production picture.
Great. And one question I guess I would ask, following up on, obviously you're examining really our focus on the underground potential at Condor North. How is permitting in Ecuador? Is it easier to permit an underground operation? Would that be potentially expedited then if there's a focus on the underground first?
I think it would probably have, the underground, Lundin permitted theirs, and that's an underground operation, 4,400 tons per day. I think versus a big open pit, 25,000 ton per day operation, it's going to be easier to permit a smaller, say, 3,000 to 5,000 ton per day underground operation for sure.
Great. Now, one question that's kind of an interesting kind of general industry question here, but are there any exploration technologies of that are being trialed by the majors that might be adopted industry-wide in the future? If so, are they, a big change or just incremental changes that you would see?
Tim, why don't you answer this one?
There are some things being tried, we're seeing things, some companies with data science and different things, kind of different approaches, and maybe some new geophysics or some are just more powerful geophysics, geophysical techniques. But yeah, I guess there are things being tried out there.
I think at the end of the day, the technology that is driving more of actual mining and how you can economically mine more so than, exploration techniques. Although there's some advancements, I think, in things like geophysics, like you talked about. But at the end of the day, you gotta find these things. You gotta do the work. You gotta put drill holes into them, and that's kind of the mainstay of exploration, right?
Absolutely. Great. Well, I think one final question here. Obviously, stock prices can go up and down, but give one possible scenario on how a new investor today can lose money buying at today's low share price. Is that impossible?
Scott, I'm going to let you handle that one.
Look, we think the PEA we put on 2021 is kind of a base case for valuation for people, and that's at $1,600 gold. Obviously, if we see gold fall below 1,600 or drop significantly from here, that's a scenario where you could definitely lose money. We think we're doing the best we can with the exploration side of things, and on a day like today when gold's down, I see we're kind of holding in flat here. So we're trying to fight the trend, but we're like everybody, we move with the macro environment a lot. And obviously, we view the country as ever improving, but I think country risk and certainly area risk is something all investors should keep an eye on in all their projects, whether it's, a mine in Arizona that's going through permitting or an exploration project in Ecuador. So it's just something to be mindful of. But, we're excited with what we're seeing. And, as Marshall said, we're not quite at the bottom. We bottomed out there at 19 or 18 cents, but certainly I was adding stock at those levels, and we think it's a good valuation here.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, right now, you still got, gold moved up here recently, and it's kind of backed off a bit. It's still being driven by the Fed, and it's being driven by the U.S. dollar, which those are two things that are kind of related. If you look back over the last couple of years, you've seen, crypto take a bite out of, gold investing. Crypto's kind of got going through a lot of crap right now, and it'll be interesting to see how much of that type of investor that was in crypto may move back towards gold. You're also seeing a lot of central bank buying of gold again. So, geopolitically, things the way they are, hopefully will, as the Fed sort of deals with what it's going to do to fight inflation, hopefully you'll start to see gold move up again. We saw that happen this last couple of weeks. So, I'm hoping for gold above 1,800 through next year, and we'll see. And that should make first the majors that are producers, the mid-tiers, the developers, and then down in the junior market, hopefully we'll get a lift out of it. So, back to Scott's point, 19 cents at the bottom, that was really ugly and terrible. But I don't think that that's the trend that we're going to see going forward, and particularly if we continue to get good results out to the market.
Great.
I think we answered that question.
Yes. And one sneaky follow-up question here, but have any insiders been buying recently?
Scott just told me.
Yes. I added about 70,000 shares in October.
Great.
Give or take.
Great. Well, I think that's all the questions we have today. I'd like to again thank Marshall Koval and Scott Hicks for presenting today. And thank you everyone for tuning in and for your interest and all your good questions today as well. Just a reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back Thursday afternoon when our webinar series continues with Acme Lithium presenting Thursday, December 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Take a good look at us.